So welcome everyone to our event. Before we get started, we'll just do an acknowledgement of country. So we wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are all meeting on. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city and this region.
So thank you so much to Rachelle Domansky for joining us as our guest speaker today. Rachelle has over 20 years experience as a psychologist in the Asia Pacific region, working in private practice, university, schools and service provider settings with children, adolescents and adults. Through her private practice, she offers a range of therapeutic interventions, including hypnotherapy to clients. She consults to government, educational, not-for-profit and corporate organisations, particularly in the areas of ESG and corporate culture, and is a non-executive director of not-for-profit and ASX listed companies. Passionate about promoting positive mental health and well-being, Rachelle has told us she's delighted to be able to engage with our members today regarding managing their mental health. So with that, over to you, Rachelle, and of course the screen sharing rule does not apply to you.
Thank you, and great to be here. Thank you everybody for your interest, and for those that are joining us later on the recorded version, hopefully you can get some value out of what we discussed today. Firstly, good on you, whoever's interacting with this, because you're taking positive steps towards supporting your mental health, which supports your physical health. We know they're interrelated. So good on you for taking that step, and hopefully we can come up with a few strategies that will be helpful in doing that. So first of all, I do not experience endometriosis, so I can only surmise what your experiences may be, but I do have an immune system condition, rheumatoid arthritis. So I have dealt and do deal with chronic pain over, I suppose it's been about 15 years now. So that gives me a small window of insight into dealing with chronic pain and the effects that that can have on us physically and mentally, and therefore socially, in our employment, all of that. So while I have not walked in your shoes, I hope that I have some empathy, and we can, take this journey together to be looking at, okay, how do we manage such things? So I'm going to be saying some things that you already know, but it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of reinforcement, and hopefully I'll be saying a few things that you didn't know, so that it's a good use of your time. So to start with, we know through research and interaction with people with endometriosis that we're at higher risk for particularly anxiety and depression. Now, sort of at least 50% of people who live with endometriosis report anxiety and depression. And as with all mental health conditions, we know that that is always an underrepresentation. So we're talking about at least half, but we know that it will be higher than that. And that is not least of all because of the link with chronic pain. What we have in terms of stress, so reporting on stress, that's at nearly 70%. So that's very high. And we know the link between stress and mental health issues. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. What we also have is increased levels of substance misuse. So we're trying to, self-medicate. And also, which some people aren't so aware of, is increased levels compared to general population of PTSD. So, and that is often related to like having numerous surgical procedures, but also impacts into other areas of your functioning and how people relate with you around that. So what we know about stress levels is that when we're stressed, we produce adrenaline and cortisol. And when we have high levels of adrenaline and cortisol over a chronic period of time, that then starts to affect our brain biochemistry. And so that's where we tend to get that link between stress and anxiety and depression. Because if you have elevated levels of adrenaline and cortisol, it's going to start putting out of whack those chemicals in your brain that you need for good, healthy brain functioning. So norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, etc. And so anyone who's under an extended period of stress is at very high risk of developing depression. So what we want to do, and we'll do that a little bit later, is look at what are some of the ways that we can manage stress. Okay, that's one of the big factors. Another big thing that's happening, especially for those with endometriosis, is that process of pain sensitization. Okay, so what happens is your system over time has then through a physiological process, has a reduced threshold for pain and has an increased sensitivity to the input of pain sensation. So you've got a double whammy going on there. And the really crappy thing is that once that pain sensitization is switched on, it can be very difficult to switch it off, even if you have had, say, a surgery to remove some tissue, and that area should technically receive some relief for at least a period of time. Sometimes that you don't get that. It's already switched on. And so you've gone through that process, and physiologically it's been not what you were hoping. But probably just as importantly is the stress and disappointment, potentially anger, whatever it is that comes up about, God, I was really counting on this, I've gone through this, and it hasn't given me any relief. And then the even more crappy part of that is that people who don't understand that process, including those somewhat in the medical profession, we get that sense of nice scarf, cattail. We get that sense of people who can't understand, who are saying, well, why are you still complaining about that pain? Like, it must be in your head now, like, or you're attention seeking, or it's an excuse not to do things, or and that is incredibly damaging to our sense of self. So that pain sensitization is a really, really important point. And I gave a talk, must be a couple of years ago now, on pain. So is that available for people to refer to later?
I believe it's on our YouTube from memory, but I will
Yeah.
double check and let everyone know.
Yeah, that's fine. But so have a look for that, because we don't have the time to go into that. But in that talk, I sort of went through a bit more about the physiological basis of that. And I think that's important to have, because when you've got people who aren't understanding, if you can give them some facts, they tend to be more amenable to supporting you in that. So that is, I think, a really important point. Now, with the research in the area, I mean, as with most research, often we start out, which is not very nice, but often we'll start out with rodents. Mice are a good subject. So this research I'm going to tell you about now is from 2017, and it was with mice as subjects. But what we've found time and time again is that they are a good indicator, and this will make sense to you anyway. But just keeping in mind, it wasn't human subjects that they were looking at for fairly obvious reasons. So what that research found was that experiencing endometriosis actually alters the brain electrophysiology, and also it alters gene expression. Okay, so you've got physical changes happening. And it's in the air, it's in a number of areas, but of most interest to us discussing this today is that it's in the areas of the insula, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. So again, you're not going to get a test on this, but it can be useful to actually have some facts to pull out of your pocket. So the insula, the amygdala, and the hippocampus, and those areas are very much involved in pain perception and anxiety and depression. Okay, so we know that we have a physiological basis for these mental health presentations. And so I think that's important to reassure yourself, but other people too, including medical professionals. Now, you're going to have some fantastic ones, I'm sure. And what's great about being in a group like this is that you can sort of give each other names of people who are good. But I am absolutely sure that at least some of you have come across, especially like a GP who's not necessarily too up to speed with this, who actually are dismissive. And this is one of the things that's really important too, because it really affects your self-concept, your self-esteem. You start to wonder, well, am I sort of having a disproportionate reaction to this pain? And that process can be incredibly difficult, and usually, and not if it sounds about right for you, on average, it takes about 4 to 6 years to get a definitive diagnosis of endometriosis. So did you have a long process?
Yeah.
And so
mine would have been 11 years from onset of symptoms.
Oh,
so
yeah, that's a very long process. Yeah. And what you go through during that time, and often being told things like, oh, you just have a low pain threshold, or that's just normal period pain, or, maybe you should try some relaxation techniques, or like being dismissed sometimes, not by everybody, but significantly enough for it to be an issue, right? So to be told for years and years and years, oh, it's fine, it's you know, you'll be fine, just off you go. So that is incredibly damaging to your sense of self, but also the isolation that brings, because feeling as though I'm not understood and I'm not supported. So, you know, that delay in diagnosis, that dismissing of some of your medical professionals, it's a real issue. And this is why it's great that, you know, there's recently, since about 2018, I think there's been more funding and, you know, wider public education and support. So, you know, it's improving, but you're still going to be finding that. And one of the things that, you know, you may come up against as well is that once you've got a diagnosis, having agency over your own body and your choices is potentially still frustrated. And I've had to write assessment letters on a number of occasions for people experiencing endometriosis who have tried so many interventions. It affects their life in so many ways. And they are, you know, nearly 40. They're not partnered. They don't want to have children, or they had hoped to have children, but because of the infertility issues from their endometriosis, effectively cannot have children. And they have requested that they have removal of their uterus and ovaries. And you've got medical professionals telling you, no, you can't do that, because then, you know, you won't have any chance of having a child. And they're saying, yes, I know that, but the chances of me having a child are about 1% because of these factors. And I fully understand this, but this is going to bring me significant relief, and this is what I want to do with my body. And to have the pushback on that is incredibly damaging. Where's the agency over your own body? Now, if you were early 20s and you were going for that option, I can, I don't agree with it, but I can understand that there would be a bit of pushback from the medical professionals, because they don't want to be sued or whatever, to actually say, well, no, I don't want to do that. I want you to go and jump through these hoops to prove, and then no, let's wait another 10 years. And but including for women who, you know, effectively there is not going to be any pregnancies or live births, to be told, no, we don't want to do that for you. So if that becomes something that is a choice for any of you, start early, because you may have to jump through some hoops, and find the right people who are going to support you in that journey. Okay, so we've got the physiological manifestations of the endometriosis, which, you know, one of the big ones is that chronic pain, but the inflammation, and the inflammation affects brain functioning, but affects everything, doesn't it? You've got that fatigue, got the brain fog, got the irritability. So that, you know, dealing with those physiological factors, but also, and again, somewhat dismissed or less known is, the difficulties with your bowels, the difficulties with penetrative sex, these things that aren't given enough importance, and the impact that that then has on your life. And for those that in their journey face infertility, a huge physical factor. So you've got those physical factors, but they are so modulated and influenced, and a cyclical sort of process with the social impacts. So you've got the impacting every domain of your life. So your work, ability to work, the impacts on that, the social impacts, in terms of not being understood or supported, but the impacts on, relationships that you have with a partner, or friends, family, colleagues, who aren't really understanding the impact. And then that gets sort of wound up in that issue of quite often then us taking on guilt, guilt around, I've just cancelled for the third time on my friend because I can't get there, or, my partner's wanting to go out, or is wanting to be intimate, or whatever it might be, and there's just no way that your body is going to allow you to do that. And so, one of the things I see in working with people with this condition is the guilt that comes up, and how that starts to affect their self-concept. So I just want to say, you're all absolute warriors, for living with this condition, and you are doing an amazing job. Other people can't understand what that is for you. There will be people who are, to varying degrees, sympathetic, hopefully empathetic, but they can't walk in your shoes. So if nothing else, please, please, please don't take on feeling guilty. You're doing the best that you can, and you're doing amazingly. Okay. So you've got that reduced function in all those domains, and then how that affects you in that, you're thinking, well, this wasn't how I saw my life, or this, I want to be out kicking goals, doing things, and it's so impacted by that. And that can then lead to that feeling of isolation. It's physical isolation, but also mental isolation. And that's incredibly important in the development of depression and the maintenance of depression. So feeling as though you're, somewhat alone, which is why groups like this are so important, to, speak with other people that have a better idea of your journey. So those social aspects are really important. So what we want to do is look at, okay, how do we best manage the experiences that we're having? And look, there's a whole range of things that can be helpful, and we also need to recognise that what's helpful for one person may not be helpful for another person. But generally speaking, there are some things that are going to help improve your experience to some degree or a lot. And so what I thought I'd focus on is looking at some of the factors that we know can make a difference to how you're managing, and it's protective of your mental health or helps you manage any mental health conditions. So one of the best things that you can do for yourself is a 20-minute walk a day. Now, having said that, I also know that there'll be days that that is just not going to happen, right? Sometimes life gets in the way, but in terms of your pain, you know, it's hard to get up and go to the bathroom or feed yourself or whatever. You're not going for a nice stroll. So there's no pressure there. But on the days that you can, a 20-minute walk is going to be amazing. And what researchers found is that in the sort of early stages of depression, a 20-minute walk, preferably daily, is just as effective as antidepressant medication. Okay, so it's nature's own antidepressant. And so what it does is, remember we talked earlier about the higher levels of adrenaline and cortisol, those stress hormones. So when you go for this walk, you're working out some of that adrenaline and cortisol. You're releasing some endorphins, those feel-good, happy chemicals. And then that is helping keep that brain biochemistry in balance. Okay, so you're working out some of the yucky stuff, you're inputting some of the good stuff, and that helps keep this more in balance. And I know, you know, myself, that I do much better when I'm able to walk. As with you, there are some days that's just not going to happen. Sometimes because of life, but often because of pain. One of my things is where I experience most of my pain and dysfunction is in my hands and feet. So it's like, oh no, I can't go and do that walk today. But I really notice the difference when I do and when I don't. So if you can, get out and walk. And when I say walk, it's not huffing and puffing and getting sweaty. It's just a nice, moderate paced walk. You don't want to be out of breath, okay? And that's a walk for your mental health. It'll help with your physical health a bit, but the main goal is your mental health. So it's a different sort of exercise than, say, if you went to the gym or you went and swam laps, because those things are really good for your, you know, cardiovascular health. They help build bone density. They can work out some of that stress, but once you start putting your body under stress with load, you're creating more adrenaline and cortisol, right? So it's a trade-off. You get good physiological benefits from it, but not necessarily all the mental benefits from it. So if you're in a position where you're doing more of the traditional sort of exercise, that's fab, that's good for you. Do it when you can, but it's a different kind and different purpose to that walk, okay? So think of them as slightly different. So if you can get that walk in, that's great. And while you're walking, if you've got a dog or something, that's good. That'll keep you busy. If you walk with someone, you may chat. But if you're a bit of a worrier and you're thinking about things and you tend to ruminate like that when you're walking, you're probably not getting all the benefit out of it. So if that's you, then, you know, listen to a podcast, listen to some music, that sort of thing. Okay, so you're giving your brain a little bit of a rest as well. So one of the big factors for anybody's functioning is sleep, right? So we need sleep to rest and recharge, and you're going to have difficulty sleeping because of pain. So sleep is not something that comes easily to us. but it's really, really important. So in those little handouts, those tip sheets that I've provided today, I've given you 7 sheets. I know it's a lot, but it's something that you can then refer to later. Obviously, we're not going to have time to go into things in depth, but you can refer to those later and say, okay, how do I put this into action? So with the sleep, progressive muscle relaxation can be helpful to try and sort of relax you and get you off to sleep. And I've included a progressive muscle relaxation sheet and also one on sleep hygiene. So by sleep hygiene, we mean, okay, what is it that you're doing to prepare for sleep and making sure that you're doing the best thing possible for your body and mind. So, things like having a warm shower or bath before you go to bed, not having caffeine too late, making sure you've got temperature regulation in your room, those sorts of things. So all of that's on that sheet. That can be, quite helpful. Another thing that's going to be helpful with that sleeping is to get off to sleep, but also if you wake and you want to get back to sleep quickly, is a breathing exercise. And I've given a breathing exercise sheet there as well. Along with the walking, breathing is one of your best friends. I know we breathe all the time or we die, right? But breathing properly. And when we're in pain, we tend to have muscle contraction. And so we're not sort of expanding and filling our lungs and emptying them well enough. And there's a real link between, I'm sure that you know, when you're really stressed or you're a bit anxious, or if any of you have experienced a panic attack, you really know about it because of your breathing. So when we're relaxed and we're, doing well, we tend to breathe from our diaphragm down here. So diaphragmatic breathing. So it's deep and it's slow. The more stressed or the more in pain we are, we tend to sort of have it come up, and it ends up, we call it clavicle, collarbone breathing. It's sort of up in here, and it's that. And then if we're going into a panic, it's that hyperventilation, right? So what we want to do is breathe. It will help switch off that adrenaline and cortisol. Okay, so when we're in pain, when we're in physical or psychological pain, we start thinking about, my partner or my boss is upset at me, or I want to have children, I don't know whether I'll be able to, or God, I don't know whether I can do another day of, this level of pain, all of those sorts of things, those thoughts, your body is going to go into a fight or flight process. Okay, so going right back to keeping us safe when we lived in caves, our body would get us ready to run away from or fight off the wolf that was coming in, or the person with a big rock or a club that was going to club us and steal us or steal our food or whatever. So we have a very primal instinct that when we perceive that we are under threat, and that can be physical or mental threat, we will produce a lot of adrenaline and cortisol. And what will happen is our breathing will fasten up, because you can imagine if you're under physical threat, it's going to be very helpful to actually be breathing where it's because you're running, right? Or you're fighting, you're going to need that. But you haven't got a wolf or a bear chasing you, or a guy with a club. So your body goes into this to protect you, but you're not needing that. What you're needing is to switch down that fight or flight reflex, switch down that adrenaline and cortisol that's getting pumped into your body. And you can do that by changing your breathing. Okay, so by changing your breathing, your brain gets the message, oh, I'm breathing like I do when I'm relaxed. If I'm breathing like that, oh, I must be relaxed. And I would only be relaxed if I'm not under threat. Okay, so just in the same way that sometimes, I don't know whether you've ever experienced this, but if you get a bit out of breath, say you're going upstairs or whatever it is, and your breathing changes, all of a sudden you start to feel a bit, oh, I feel a bit edgy, I feel a bit anxious. There's no reason for me to be feeling anxious. But maybe your brain's gone, oh, hang on, I'm breathing like I do when I'm anxious and I'm under threat. So, oh, I must be under threat. So we can actually, adjust it a little bit by changing our breathing rate. Because when we're relaxed, we're going to breathe from our diaphragm. And that breathing, I'll just show you quickly, but you can have a look on the sheet, is breathing as deeply as you can, and it's breathing in for 4 counts through your nose, holding it for 2 counts, breathing out for 6 counts through your mouth. Okay, so big breath in. And what's important there is that hold for 2 seconds, because when we're pretty chilled, and you'll notice yourself, or if you know someone who snores, you listen to their rhythm of breathing when they're snoring. It's kind of that. Right? They do that deep breath in, there's a hold, there's a pause, and then there's that release. So that pause is important, and that's what sort of tells your brain, oh, I'm pausing, I'm not, so I must be okay. All right? So that breathing, do it any time of the day. Do it when you're in the shower. Do it when you're sitting on the loo. Do it when you're waiting at a long traffic light. Do it when you're feeling in pain or anxious or angry. Do it when you're trying to get off to sleep. Do it when you wake up and you want to get back to sleep before you get caught up in thinking too much. Okay? It's really, really useful. It's free. It's good for you. It's quick. It's going to be one of your best friends. Okay? So breathing is important. Related to that is relaxing generally, and relaxing your mind as much as your body. And one of the things that's helpful there is to engage in mindfulness. So I've included 2 sheets around that. There's the mindfulness sheet, and there's the managing stress sheet. So check those out. Now, mindfulness is useful. It's slightly different to meditation. Some of you may have engaged in meditation, and people have varying levels of success with that. My brain is always on. I'm on the spectrum for ADHD. Meditating for me in the traditional sense, in terms of, okay, empty your brain, don't think of anything, doesn't really happen. So what I need to do is use mindfulness, which is a little bit more active. You're just focusing on one thing. So focusing on one thing still gives your brain a holiday, right? Still gives you a bit of downtime in that. And that is why, back in the day, before I had RA, 2 of the things that really worked for me, because I had to focus on them, I used to do martial arts. So you have to focus, otherwise you're going to get hit. And the other thing was in competing in cars and motorbikes. So for me, again, you have to focus, otherwise you're going to be in real trouble. So for me, so other people would say, wow, isn't that really stressful? Like I said, no, it's actually the opposite. To me, it's relaxing, even though I have to be really on guard because I'm only thinking about one thing. Whereas my usual experience is I'm thinking about 10 different things, not at once or sequentially in rapid succession, but it's just noise all the time. So for me, mindfulness is a really good option. So have a look at that mindfulness sheet. That's going to help. Another sheet that I've got there for you is on thinking styles. So unhelpful thinking. And all of us fall into this from time to time, but we find when we're tired or fatigued, when we're in pain, our ways of thinking are not as functional as they usually would be. And for some people, when they're hangry, right? So, the way that you're thinking, you can get caught in these unhelpful thinking styles. So catastrophizing, for example, we overestimate how bad this is or how often it happens. Other things like personally feeling responsible or guilty for things when it's really not on you, worrying that the worst thing is going to happen, things like that. We get sort of stuck in these thinking patterns, and all of us do it to some degree at some time. But you might find in just going through those sheets, you go, oh yeah, actually I overgeneralize, or I personalize things. I think if someone's unhappy, it's something that I've done, And if you can identify that there might be a couple there that are your bag, it might be worth sort of looking at that and working on that. Now, the thing is, we can know, but actually being able to tease out exactly why that happens and starting to challenge that can sometimes be a little bit tricky. So you may be able to do it yourself. You may be able to do it in talking to someone who has a similar experience, or it might be that you need to consider going to a professional counsellor, psychologist to actually get some help with that. It just helps you get a bit more of a perspective, and it's hard to step out of ourselves, right? Like we can know logically, but to step out of ourselves and deal with how we're feeling can be a little bit tricky. So, one of the things in all those sheets that I've given you are really good self-help stuff, which you may be able to do yourself, or you may need to have a little bit of support in doing with a therapist. But that, with a therapist, also we're talking about, our emotional, our psychological pain, but also they can be really helpful with your physical pain. Okay, so pain management. And there's a whole range of strategies that can be used there. And as I was saying, including hypnotherapy, which a lot of people find very helpful. So, keep in mind that there are people out there that can assist you. But one of the big factors are social supports. Okay, so not isolating. So that's social support in talking, to people who can understand your experience somewhat, which you do through this group. And that's really important. But also just social supports in terms of the practical aspects of, okay, if you're not doing so well, do you have a family member or a friend or someone, if you've got the resources, you pay to come and do, your housework or your washing or whatever it is, people that can give you a hand with the practical stuff as well. That get you out of the house on those times when, okay, you're not feeling great, but yeah, I could get out and go and do something. There's times when you can't and you need to cocoon, absolutely. But there are times when you can go, and that's going to be good for your physical and mental health to get out and do that. The impacts on all domains, as we're saying, your relationships with family, partners, friends, your ability to earn an income as well. So often endometriosis is going to impact on your working ability, your earning ability, therefore your independence, your housing, everything becomes involved in that. And so, I've had a number of clients with endometriosis who over years have had to alter their working capacity. And so it's a really huge impact. And there's not enough done currently to support in terms of recognising it as the disability that it can be. But one area that we do have is that it is recognised as a supported condition under the Disability Employment Services Program. So if any of you at any time find that your employment is affected, you need to change work, for example, you need to move to part-time work, etc., you do have support under the Disability Employment Services Program. So do look into that and access it. Okay. Nearly there for the break. Just a couple of other things to chat, and this is the really boring part because it's just me yakking on, right? So the bit I look forward to is the question and answer sort of section. But a really big thing is please, please, please don't compare yourself to other people. Not to the general population, but not to other people who live with endometriosis. Every single one of you is unique and different in your experience, and you know that within that experience, how much pain you deal with, the impacts on your mental health, your life can go up and down, right? So your journey is not a linear one, and your journey is completely different to somebody else's. But yet we fall into this sort of thinking pattern, which is not helpful, which is we look at other people and go, well, what are they doing? Or, well, that person's still working full time, or that person managed to have a child, or that person is doing more socially. Okay? You cannot compare yourself. You are on your own journey. And so it's incredibly damaging to compare yourself to someone else and then start beating yourself up about it. So a really big thing is to have some self-compassion. Okay. Now, it's unfair. It is unfair that you are living with this condition. It's shit, right? It is unfair. And it's really important to treat yourself gently as you go, right? And sometimes you're going to get frustrated and you're going to get angry and you're going to feel guilty and you're going to feel annoyed that other people aren't understanding whatever it is. Yeah, That's going to come and go. But what you can do is try to be a little bit kind to yourself. As I said earlier, you are absolute warriors. You are doing so well, right? Despite what you're living with, you function to some degree every day. You know, so you have to recognize what you can do and what you did do, not what you didn't do. Okay, there's always going to be stuff you don't do. So focus on what you are doing and treat yourself gently, please, please, please. Okay, and part of that is looking after your physical and mental health. So that's self-care. So some of the things we've talked about there, but we also know that, you know, there are a number of factors that tend to trigger a flare. So included in that stuff, you know, like the sleep and the stress, etc. But just be mindful. And again, it's not fair. It's not fair, but maybe avoid some of those inflammatory foods. Maybe avoid caffeine, avoid alcohol, or limit your intake. And it sucks and it's not fair, especially someone sitting next to you who is, woohoo, you know, putting all this stuff in. That's not going to be a problem for them. It's going to be a problem for you potentially. So it's about weighing up the cost and the benefit, because we all like those things. Not all of us, some of us, right? Like those things, but be mindful, do it in moderation, all right? Don't have it cost you too much. So as part of that self-care, be mindful of those sorts of things, okay? But the number one thing is show yourself some compassion. All right, I'll stop talking now.
We were just wondering if you could give us your 3 top tips to the members here today, as well as those who couldn't join the event, just in regards to their mental health, and any advice you have, if that's okay.
Sure. I'm going to combine one of them. So squeeze another one in there. So 3 top tips. 1, walking and breathing, right? Those 2 things that we're talking about. Easy, free, good effect, a lot of bang for your buck, okay? So that really will help with your self-care. The self-care and compassion, okay? Being kind to yourself. Putting yourself under more pressure is not helping. Okay, so your self-care and compassion, take that time, take what you need so that you can work on those things like your sleep, your diet. It's important. And then the third one is seek help when you need to. Okay, so that therapy, and the thing that I've realised I didn't talk about, I meant to, alongside with therapy if you need it, is antidepressants. You know, none of us like to take medication that we don't need. No one wants to do that. Sometimes we need to take certain medications, okay? And when I say antidepressants, it could be for use with a major depressive disorder, okay, but often used at lower doses for helping with that pain sensitization, okay? So that's something to keep in mind, that there is, apart from a lot of other medications that, you know, which you'll probably all be very well aware of in terms of managing pain, so opioids or other pain medication that to assist with sleep. You know, there's a number of things that assist with inflammation. You'll be aware of a number of those, but the antidepressants, in terms of helping with mood, but also pain. So don't be averse to investigating that.
Rachel, thank you again for giving up your Saturday morning to join us. We
Pleasure.
know you're an absolute wealth of knowledge. Love having you come and join us for a repeat session. So thank you so much again.